Hello again, and this is part 2 of Module 2 of IELTS Academic Writing Task 1 preparation. And in this task, we're going to just focus on just a little bit on the maps type question in Academic IELTS Writing Task 1. And again, process and maps happen or occur only about 25% of the time, and maps are very infrequent in Academic IELTS Task 1, but they do happen. And so we're going to just take a look at this section and just consider some of the particular requirements necessary. So as I mentioned before, even for map type questions for Academic IELTS Task 1, we are once again going to go and use our 4-step approach. So even when we're looking at this map here, we're just going to ignore the map entirely. We're going to go straight to the paraphrase. We're going to ignore the charts and graphs and the pictures and everything else in IELTS Writing Task 1, and we're just going to focus on that one sentence because it's going to give us the a better understanding of what it is that we're actually going to describe. And here it says the two maps below show an island before and after the construction of some tourist facilities. Okay, so once again, we're just going to go straight to paraphrasing the sentence. So we can do this right away. We don't have to waste time analyzing this map at this point. And just by paraphrasing this sentence, we're going to get a clear idea of what it is that we're describing. Let's take a look at our example. The diagram illustrates the map of an island before and after the development of tourist facilities. Okay, so that paraphrase there gives us a clear understanding of what it is that we want to do. Step 2, it's time to divide information. It is rare to see a map when it's just a single map, although it does happen. Sometimes we do have a map and with just a single map. And if we just have a single map, then maybe we want to divide the information of the map by dividing sections of the actual map. In a sense, when we are dividing the maps, we always have to divide the map somehow because in terms of direction, in terms of place, when we're describing individual maps. But in this instance, when we're going to think about paragraphing, we can see that there is a map before and after the construction. So obviously, we're going to just write 2 body paragraphs, 1 paragraph before and 1 paragraph after. It's also important to notice that the first map is rather empty. It does not have as much detail as the second map. And in this particular instance, it would make a lot more sense that for our first body paragraph describing the map before the construction, it would actually have a lot less details than our second body paragraph, which is fine. It would be completely okay. The sizes of the body paragraphs in IELTS Academic Task 1 don't matter that much. They don't have to be parallel. Again, it's important to mind because when we begin to talk about writing Task 2, that may be completely different. It may be an important distinction. But for Academic Writing Task 1, that will not matter. We're just broadly dividing the information. So let's go ahead. And again, we have to consider active or passive voice once again. Again, when we think about the first paragraph, when we look at the first map before, we would probably use a lot more active voice because we would just be describing what's happening. But passive voice will most likely be the dominant voice we want to use because we can see that there is construction which occurred on the second map, which is the main focus of our task. We need to describe the construction, but we don't know who constructed any of these tourist attractions on the map. Were these people? Was this a company? Were there machines involved? We don't know. Was this a government effort? We don't know who it was that did this. So we are just going to use passive voice throughout this particular task. So let's start first of all with understanding when we talk about, and again, unlike the first maps that we saw where it shows a constant process, here we have a clear before and after. And this is very often happens with maps when you see a map from 1950s and 1970s, or a map of a town in the early 19th century and then maybe 20th century. We can see a clear before and after. So unlike the processes we saw before, we're not going to use simple present, right? We're not going to use simple present, right? We're going to use simple past. And again, we're going to use a passive voice, but in simple past, because presumably all the things that happened in the past. Again, subordinations are very important, but the thing that's going to be important is to organize this information in respect to position. So the geographic position of different features of the map are going to be important. Whether things are to the west, or on the west side of something, or to the north, or to the south. For example, we can say that the beach is on the western side of the island. Okay? Once again, we will need to use subordinations, but those positions, those geographic position markers are going to be essential to help us to describe where certain features of the map are. So, beginning with the first map, right? So it's also a good idea to review prepositions of place. These could be the simple prepositions of place that we know. So first of all, now that we've kind of divided information, we know that we have, we know what we're going to spend time on. We know that we're going to spend the first body paragraph talking about the first map and the other map. And during this division, this process of dividing the information, we also kind of identified that we're going to have to use passive voice, and we kind of thought about what features we want to talk about first and we talk about next. Let's begin with this map. So looking at this map here, we can see that there's not much here, but we do need to think about a certain area that we want to start from. Maybe from the left to the right, from the center to the right, and again to the left, from the top to the bottom. And we want to, of course, be able to describe in as much detail as possible, even the features that we can see. Before any tourist development took place, the roughly 250-meter-long surface of the island was almost empty apart from a few palm trees near the western shore of the beach. Okay? Again, we didn't spend a lot of time or a lot of effort describing the very few details that we have on this map. There's really the beach, there's empty area, a few palm trees around. We have a measurement that shows a 100-meter length. So we can sort of approximate that this is around a 250 meter long island. We don't have to be very precise here, right? We said the roughly, but very important, we have not forgotten about our subordinations. So even if when you have not too many details, instead of writing this information in 2 or 3 short sentences, we're combining to our best ability as much information as possible using subordinations like before, after, when, and while. Those subordinations, those complex sentences, which are ultimately going to lead us to the highest possible score in IELTS. So we can move now to our second paragraph or our second chart, and we can see here this is going to be a much more complex task. So looking at this map, we can see we have a lot more features here on this map. And again, we're going to require, there are some vocabulary we can see, such as the beach. We can see accommodation, right? Accommodation is a non-count. We can think about housing, reception, restaurant, a pier. So we can see the major features here. And these features include the footpath and the vehicle track. It's very important not to forget these. These are major features, so including all of those features will be essential. Let's take a look at an example. After the construction of recreational amenities on the island, a central reception was established roughly in the center of the island, surrounded by a series of vehicle tracks leading to other facilities on the island. A series of hut-like accommodations were built in a circular pattern on the western side of the island, with a footpath connecting each unit along with the western beach, which was turned into a swimming area. On the eastern side of the reception, a much larger accommodations area was built with almost twice as many units built in a similar circular formation and connected by a complex of footpaths. Just behind the reception, the island's sole restaurant was constructed, while towards the front of the reception and connected by a vehicle track, a pier was built to accommodate a variety of ships and yachts. It is important to point out that the entire eastern part of the island was left intact. So essentially, we combine a lot of this information, and again, we paraphrase the accommodations with hut-like structures, and we also identify that towards the right of the island, the area was left intact, was not changed significantly. So some important parts here. Of course, we're using passive voice, and this is past tense. This is simple past tense passive voice. So using that passive voice, we're identifying that these different features were built or constructed, right? But we don't know who was the actor that constructed or built all of these amenities, so to say, right? Also, as we're using passive voice, we are using also a variety of verbs. Sure, the verb built seems to be a verb that we might use, but also we are using other verbs such as established, constructed, turned into, connected, right? In addition to simply built. And these different verbs, apart from just built, are very useful, right? But they are quite precise, so they need to be used precisely as well. Right? Built, of course, can be used for any feature, whether it's a house or a road or a farm. Established, specifically, we can use when we are creating something like an institution that is supposed to last for a long time. Colleges, universities, restaurants are established. These are establishments or places that are, or institutions or places of business that are created to last for a long time. Construction, the word construction is used specifically for buildings. So when they're built from scratch. Erected is used for tall buildings such as towers and skyscrapers, right? Laid down is usually used for roads, pathways, sidewalks, anything that's on the ground, laid down, right? So streets are laid down, pathways are laid down. Developed is when you see the build up of something. So we are referring to constructions or features which already had some development or have seen some construction or existence in the past, but have been expanded upon or built up upon, renovated in terms of being made new or rebuilt entirely into something better. And again, for expanded, it's a little bit different than develop, because with expansion, we're actually leaving the original features intact. We're simply building up additional features along with the existing features that we see. So, and again, very important here, we're using those position markers, words that signal where places are, right? So phrases such as on the eastern side or on the western side or along with the western beach, or in a circular position, okay, or just behind or in the middle, right? So in order to describe all of these different features, right? And again, these position markers are going to be essential for maps in order to describe them effectively. And once again, we are using a lot of subordinations in this task as well, because those complex sentences not only help us to write more efficient sentences, they help to make our sentences give us a much higher score for IELTS, because IELTS really loves complex sentences. Now we are finished, except for the last step, which is the overview. And yes, even with maps, we still need an overview. And I guess for this particular overview, it's rather simple. Again, it's very important for maps, for processes, for any types of IELTS writing task 1, we cannot bring our opinions to the table. It's a descriptive task. We are only describing things, so we have to avoid opinions here. And again, the relationship is pretty simple here. There was nothing before, and then there are tourist facilities, but we still need to complete that task of writing an overview, writing that general idea, even for maps, in order to satisfy our IELTS requirements in order to get the highest score possible. Overall, the vast majority of this virgin landscape of the island was transformed into a carefully planned tourist attraction. And once again, we have a little bit more than 150 words, and we have satisfied the requirements of this task just by following those 4 steps. So to sum up our first and second module of academic IELTS writing task 1, for any academic IELTS task 1 that we are going to write, we always have to remember to highlight all of the features. And when I mean highlight all the features, is that if we have to talk about all of the countries, all of the types of resources that we need to describe, all of the types of constructions on the maps, all the steps necessary to produce certain processes in time. So we want to highlight all the features, but also we need to extend all of those features, right? To produce data in the form of percentages and numbers and prices perhaps, but also extension in terms of showing direction and position on maps, or even to show which step came first and after, right? We must always include an overview, right? We must have complex sentences. We must be very careful to avoid opinions in any of these academic tasks. We want to have precise vocabulary, right? A precise use of vocabulary, and care about those collocations as well. And for the highest score possible, we need to use a variety of complex sentences. So even if you use 1 or 2 complex sentences such as because and if or even when, we want to use a variety, more than just one complex sentence, more than just because or although. We want to use a variety of complex sentences and a variety of combinations of those complex sentences in order to get the highest possible score.